ever feel like God is missing? I've always been a bit of a band nerd. Played clarinet in the wind ensemble growing up. Any other fellow band nerds? You play anything when you're going through school? That is great. We'll get you up on the platform in the worship team right away. So wonderful that you just volunteered. No, but back in 2007, I played bass clarinet in the pit orchestra for my high school's music theater production of Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, at the start of the musical, the curtain rises, and you have Curly here, that man, and then his Aunt Eller. And they're chatting it up. And they get to the end of their chat, and then a young farm girl, Lori, comes and enters the scene. And of course, she and Curly have sort of a flirtatious moment, and then it's a musical, so of course it turns into a song, and on it goes. And so one night, though, I'm sitting in the pit orchestra, and I'm watching all of this, and it's unfolding. Curly and Aunt Eller get to the end of their dialogue. They pause for Lori to come in. No Lori. She didn't come in. And then this pause becomes a very pregnant pause. It becomes a long, stretching moment. Where is she? I don't know, right? And they realize, you can see it on their faces, they start to realize, it's been too long already. We have to say something, right? And so they don't know, these actors, they don't know where Lori is. They don't know what's going on backstage, when she might be available. They just start making up dialogue. They start pulling it out of nowhere. Right? I mean, could you imagine? And all of us in the pit, we're watching this unfold, and we're going, where is she? What could she possibly be doing back there? And so they made up dialogue for like 2 minutes, which sounds like a short amount of time. It's an eternity on the platform, I promise you. And to this day, I still don't know what was going on backstage. But in life, it can sure feel like there are moments where God has missed his cue. Moments when things are up in the air, moments when things are coming apart even, and we pray and we look for God to make his entrance and to protect us or to make it better, and no God. God's missing. And we're going, where are you? But we know that God, he is not like some high schooler backstage having some sort of wardrobe malfunction, right? And so when God is missing, what can possibly be the reason for his absence? Well, last week we talked about that. Pastor Doug kicked this off and talked about, well, how actually God isn't missing. He sent Jesus to rescue us. We all have a story that he is writing, an epic story, and it begins with his rescue. And then all the chapters after that, all the days of our life, he is writing a powerful, beautiful story. And so God is not missing from our story. In the series, we're looking at all of the ways in which when God appears to be missing, he is actually working. There's possibilities for what he might be doing in that time when we're not really sure what he's doing. And today we're exploring the possibility that a lot of the times God, in those moments, is actually growing us. And to see how that's possible today, we're gonna actually rewind to the story of Joseph. Now, if you remember this, about a month ago, we went through the story of Joseph, but there's more to glean from it. We showed the musical, as you can see here. If you were here, you remember that. But we've got more to get out of this narrative. What you need to know is that Joseph, this was about 1900 BC. He, his family are shepherds. And at the time, he is 17. He's got 10 older brothers, though, and he's the baby. He's his father's favorite. And so his dad has given him this nicely ornamented coat, and of course his brothers resent that he's babied and the favorite, and he gets these special things. But then to top all of that off, Joseph has these mysterious dreams. He has dreams that his brothers will one day be bowing down to him. And of course, like a 17-year-old, naturally, he tells his brothers about these dreams. Maybe not the best idea. And of course, they resent him even more. They despise him. And that's where we pick up today in Genesis chapter 37. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Just goes to show you, there's a lot of dysfunction in this family. There's some hate there. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him. Let's throw him in one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Now, when Reuben, one of his brothers, heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. He said, let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and later take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. Now, the cistern is a water retention pit, probably used for feeding livestock. This cistern was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. They were traders. And Judah said to his brother, well, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on them. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. So when the Ishmaelites, the Midianite merchants, came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him down to Egypt. So it's quite the story, but I want you to imagine for a second, be a little bit less detached. Put yourself in Joseph's shoes. Think about what it would have felt like to be in this situation, to be him, where you've been betrayed by your own flesh and blood. Your brothers have decided to get rid of you. They've treated you as an enemy. They've taken your most precious possession. They've thrown you in a cistern, in a dark pit, a hole that you can't get out of. And he's in the hole, like what would you be thinking? In the hole, he's probably praying, like, God, help me out here, protect me, change the situation, somehow alter the paradigm so that this evil thing doesn't happen to me, this injustice. And yet, aside from maybe protecting his life, God doesn't do that. He lets it all happen. And so if you're the one praying in this dark pit, you're all alone, God doesn't seem to move, then to you, God seems to be missing. That's the feeling. I'm alone in this. And so they take him down to Egypt. And Joseph had been taken there, and Potiphar, an Egyptian, who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well-built and handsome, which is relevant because after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. Now one day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told this story: "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." Now, when his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison in the place where the king's prisoners were confined. So you're Joseph, you go through all of this stuff, you go down to Egypt, suddenly the things start to get better for you. Your life starts to get put back together a bit, you find your footing, and then all of a sudden, through no fault of your own, through an act of injustice, you're right back in the pit. Different pit, still in the pit. And you're going, again? What are you doing, God? Where are you? And we have not been through some of the same things as Joseph. It's different for everybody. But we've all had moments like that, right? Moments when we've been in the pits. Some deeper than others, but there are times when we've suffered inconvenience or misfortune or straight up tragedy. We've had relational trouble, maybe money trouble or health or job trouble or our dreams, some dreams fall through. And over the course of your life, I'm sure right now, just take a moment, think about what some of those pits have been for you. Identify a couple of them. I'll just give you a second here. And now I want you to focus in on one of those. So dial in one of those, and I want you to recall in that pit moment of your life, what did you feel? What were the thoughts? What were the emotions? Even if you were a Christian when that happened, you believe in Jesus, even if you knew intellectually that God doesn't abandon us, that he promises not to do that, when he doesn't show up in the way that you think he should show up, then what does that feel like? Did you feel alone in whatever that thing was? Did you feel loss? Did you mark it down as a tragic moment? Now, part of my responsibilities here at Pathfinder are to lead the weekend team, which consists of staff who lead in the areas of worship and production, hospitality, student and kids ministry, School of the Arts. And one of the team building exercises that we do, especially when we have a new team member coming on board, is that we create and share a timeline of our lives. And then we take 10 to 15 minutes sharing that timeline with one another to get to know one another better. You can see here, this is one that I saved from the last time we did the exercise. And we draw drawings to represent the high moments of life below or above the line, and then the moments of the more negative things, the pit moments in life, they go below the line. And it's really powerful when somebody takes the time to think about their story from start to present and to share that story. It's really powerful to hear that. It's an honor, it's a privilege. But what I've learned over the course of doing this a handful of times now is I've started to see something that I initially did not. As people have shared their stories and have had to share mine several times, I've started to realize just how much these negative moments, these in the pit moments, they actually lead to the next positive moment on the timeline. These in the pits moments, they drive at, they provide the necessary growth moments for us to receive the next good thing in our lives. It generally holds true. And in my own life, I saw it, how my parents split, which eventually led to our move to Texas, just started a whole journey in my life where I eventually started asking bigger questions about life and embraced my faith as my own. Or in high school, when I tried out for a drum major twice and didn't get it. And that was a hard moment for me, but it forced some emotional growth. And it eventually led me to the realization that I probably shouldn't ever make music my main career, even though I love it. And it helps me to dial in on, no, I'm called to become a student ministry director. And then later in life, I was told, nope, you wouldn't be a good church planter by a more experienced pastor. And then that crushed me. But it led me to focus on being a good father, and it eventually laid the foundation for me to grow in the ways that I needed to grow to church plant later in life. In adulthood, I started having panic attacks. At one point, I ruptured my Achilles tendon and those moments forced me to focus more about my mental and physical health. My daughter's cancer journey forced me to embrace community more deeply as I was new to this area and to trust in God more fully. And so all along the way, I started to realize through sharing my story just how much God used the, quote, negatives in order to drive growth that would lead me to some of the biggest positives in my life. And even now, like even in the past week, there's some stuff that I'm like, I don't like that about what's going on in my life right now. And I'm like, oh, like looking at this again, I'm like, oh, like that could be there to grow me. I mean, last week, Pastor Doug, he talked about superheroes. He showed that clip of Superman, right? It's true. Just look at their lives and how much each superhero, they always have some tragic circumstance in their background that leads to who they become. So Superman, for example, he loses his planet, Krypton, and that means that he has to come to Earth and he becomes the hero that we know. Or you think about in the Spider-Man movie, how Peter Parker, he loses his uncle Ben, and that forces him to take more responsibility for the great power he has been given. Or think about in the Karate Kid, not a traditional superhero, but close, how Ralph gets beat up, and that's what forces him to seek out a mentor so that he can wax on and wax off and ultimately get his super karate skills, right? This is the thing, is just as the superheroes had tragic things that led to growth, that led to receiving good things, so too, it's the same for us. I'm no superhero, and maybe neither of you, but we wouldn't be the people we are today without a little bit of pressure, a little bit of challenge that has forced necessary growth in our lives. And if that's how it works, like I'm not even sure it's possible to grow without at least some sort of pressure. I'm not sure that's possible. I've been thinking about that. But if that's how it works, that the trials in our lives are key to our growth, then maybe we have to, or definitely we have to, reframe how we see and respond to these moments. These things that we put on the bottom of our timeline. Like, can we can't really call them negative anymore. If God's using them, maybe hard moments, low moments, but negative, can we paint with that broad a brush, knowing that God works in those moments for our good? I don't think we can do that anymore. We have to begin to reframe what God is doing, our assumptions about what he's up to. Just think about the story of Joseph. What did he need? He was immature. He was babied by his father. He needed some healthy detachment to become his own man, and he needed to learn how to steward the gifts that he had been given because God had things in store for him. God wanted him to make a big difference in the world, but he couldn't do that without learning to steward his gifts. And so the misfortunes that Joseph had in his life, significant misfortunes that were either allowed by God or actively arranged by God, like those put Joseph in positions to grow his skills and influence. Just think about it, right? He went from being his father's errand boy to learning how to manage the household of a royal Egyptian. And then even when he's put in prison, he gets a bigger opportunity, responsibility. While Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison as a prisoner. It's crazy. But he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything, just like Potiphar, paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. This is the thing. He goes from his father's errand boy, and through these misfortunes, he learns how to manage a household. He learns how to run a prison. He eventually, because he interprets one of Pharaoh's dreams, he ends up being put in charge of all of Egypt so that he can help stave off this regional drought, this food crisis that's coming. He keeps it from becoming a catastrophe. God uses him in a powerful way, but none of it would have been possible. He wouldn't have been prepared for it or in a position for it if he hadn't been thrown in a few pits along the way. This is the thing. It's sort of an original Slumdog Millionaire situation. If you've seen that movie where Jamal, he's, the movie's a little controversial, but I love the premise. Like Jamal is able to answer every question right on this fictional version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire because of the hardships he's endured in his past. And likewise, God uses the trials in our lives to actively invest in our future. A more active or contemporary, more recent example of this might be this guy. Anybody know this guy's name? What's his name? Say it. Jimothy, that's right. If you're a social media user, you may have seen Jimothy all over your feed in the past few days and weeks. Jimothy is a raccoon, but he doesn't look quite right. He runs a little bit like a monkey. And you know what? Jimothy, he didn't become the most popular raccoon and bring smiles to millions of faces because he had a normal life. No, he first had to go through some sort of short spine syndrome. Apparently he's fine health-wise, but he had to go through this, right? And maybe I'm forcing this a little bit for you young people out there, but we have to begin to reframe the negatives in our lives, the hardships in our lives. We think, hardship, trial, suffering, we put that in the negative category. That's bad. God is not here. We have to relearn all of that. It doesn't mean that God is missing. When that's the way we think, that God is missing, actually what we're showing is that we are missing God. He's not missing, we're missing him. Because in those moments, he's there, he is working. We just have to notice it. And in our story in the past, in Joseph's story, if we take time and we notice the through lines, we can see this. For Joseph, constantly we see throughout the narrative that the Lord was with Joseph. Some wording, different wordings of that. But all throughout chapter 39, you have this, the Lord is with Joseph, the Lord granted him success, the Lord blessed Joseph, over and over again. Like he was not absent from Joseph's narrative in the high moments, in the trials. God was there consistently working for his good and developing him. The second through line that I noticed is that God was opening new doors through misfortunes. It's a little bit trite to say it, but in this case, it holds up that God, when he closes a door, he opens a new one, a better one, if we'll see it. And we see in the narrative how Joseph's skills and his character were gradually stretched and strengthened for his own good and for the glory of God and the good of others. And near the end of his life, when his father had died, Joseph's brothers, they freak out. It's like, dad is gone. Joseph, who is second in charge of all Egypt now he has the power to get back at us, to get revenge at us for what we did to him, for throwing him in the cistern and selling him off. But at the end of the Joseph story in Genesis 50, we see how Joseph has entirely reframed the narrative, including what his brothers did to him. Instead of this missing God narrative, his narrative is different. It's more accurate. He says to his brothers, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. See, it's amazing. Joseph has entirely reframed this episode from the false narratives to the truth of it. And it foreshadows what God would do some 1933 odd years later, when he sent his son Jesus to his people who did not treat him as a brother, but sold him as a slave, mocked him, testified against him. He was arrested falsely. He was sold out. He was given over to the governor for the governor to do as he would. And this is what they did to Jesus, just as they did to Joseph. The people crucified Jesus to get rid of him as a problem in their lives, and yet Jesus himself allowed it. He leaned into the suffering of it because he saw God's will for him in it, that God would use it for the saving of many lives. And so Jesus submitted to the suffering, to the trial that God for him. It put him in the exact position he needed to be in order to redeem and to rescue us. You are redeemed and rescued because Jesus leaned into the suffering that God had appointed for him. In Romans, in chapter 5, it says it this way: Jesus was delivered over to death for our sins and was raised to life for our justification. Therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him we have gained access by faith into his grace, in which we now stand. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings. What? We're gonna come back to that. Glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us by faith. This is a profound thing as Paul talks about what Jesus has done for us and applies this in our own lives as we follow Jesus. He reminds us that suffering is productive. Suffering produces. Suffering is not a waste. It is not an unredeemable tragedy. Suffering is something that can give us, can pour into our lives. It produces perseverance as we learn to endure it, which gives us increasing character, and character gives us hope. That as we go through suffering in our lives and these trials in our lives, and we see how God works in them and is faithful in them over time, it gives us hope, because we see how God can use any situation and does use every situation for our good. And so suffering is productive. In time, we can even get to a point where when suffering finds us, we can glory in our sufferings, which is insane and incredible that we could ever do that. That when suffering comes our way, we could go, I'm gonna glory in that. This word here for glory, kaxomai, it literally means to hold your head up high. We could translate it as boasting, but not an arrogant boasting. This verb is in the middle voice, so it's something you do for yourself. It's a boasting that we do because we know what suffering can do when God uses it. It is a boasting in the sufferings we receive because we know that God will work in those all things for our good. And so this is healthy self-talk. It's boasting in our sufferings, knowing God can use that, and I can lean into that, and there's gonna be something good at the other side of it. But you have to make the choice to boast in faith in your sufferings. This remarkable woman is Joni Eareckson Tada. And at the age of 17, same age as Joseph, she suffered a terrible diving accident that left her paralyzed. And I can only imagine, like if you put herself in her shoes, like I can only imagine how hard that would be, the dark nights of the soul, the feeling that so much has been robbed from you, the depression that would follow. And yet she learned to make the choice to lean into this as God growing her, to learn to therefore boast in what has happened to her. She eventually says, this paralysis is my greatest mercy. It's a gift of God. It's caused her to focus on more important things. Like, that's an incredible shift and reframing. Another person who's done this is comedian Michael Jr., a Christian comedian. He says, much like a slingshot, the further you've been set back, the further you're gonna reach. The more you're stretched, the more you're strengthened. The more you're stretched, the more potential energy you have to push you forward. These people learn to reframe these sufferings as things that God used, just like Joseph did. So, in your own life, when you're waiting for God to appear on stage, there's a choice you can make. When you're waiting for him to make his entrance and he doesn't in the time that you think he should, you could throw up your hands, you could say God is missing, or you can rightly assume that God is working behind the curtain, behind the scenes, working for your good. He's authoring a new chapter in your story. It's gonna be a good one. And if he doesn't show up the way that you think he should, it's because there's something better he is working in your life. He is growing you. And it's time not to push away, but it's time to lean in, to say, I can boast in that, I can lean in, I can see what God has for me in this. And leaning in can look like a couple of different practices. It can look like remembering God's faithfulness in your own story, remembering that as you think about your story in the past and all the ways he's shown up, like what God does with all of that stuff, therefore he can work in this moment. I can trust him in this moment. Leaning in means checking the instinct to run from suffering. We have such an instinct to go, suffering is bad, suffering is terrible, suffering can't do any good. I'm gonna run away from that. I'm gonna flee it. I'm gonna get out of it as quick as possible, but check the instinct. What if you sat in that for a minute to see if God has something for you in it? So many of the history's greatest heroes have learned to sit in their suffering and do good and see good through that. Leaning in means embracing tentatio, which is a Latin word that means spiritual struggle. That God wants us to struggle with what's going on in our lives in faith with him. To lean into it, to pray about it, to tell him when we don't understand something or when we think he's missed his cue, and to wrestle with that together. Joseph's dad, Jacob, literally wrestled with God, a very famous chapter in the Bible. God invites us to wrestle and take these things and explore them with him. And finally, pray for formation. In my daughter's cancer journey, as so often in many of our journeys, when we're in the pit, we just get caught up in getting out of that thing. And that's what we were caught up in. How do we get her life saved? How do we move through this to get life back to normal? But instead, Pastor Dion reminded me, pray for formation in the midst of this. Pray for whatever growth God has in store for you and your loved ones. Pray that you see it and can embrace it. And that's gonna be the thing that ultimately is best for you and for those you care about. But today, because so many times we haven't done number one, we haven't taken the time to fully look at our story, put it together, piece out how God has been present in it. So today I wanna take a moment, I wanna set up a time for us to do exactly that. In this next few minutes, I'm gonna give you time to process your story and to think about the most significant moments in your story. Think about maybe the most 10 significant moments. What will go above the line, what you normally would put below the line is a negative, but now we maybe can't say entirely that it's negative. We can't paint with that broader brush. Think about the above the line stuff. Think about the hard stuff. Think about how God has worked in all of it, and notice the through lines of his presence and his opening doors. Notice those things. In this next moment, be okay with a little bit of silence as we all meditate together. The band will come back out and we'll seal this moment when it's right. But take a moment. I wanted to give you a piece of paper so you could do sort of as we usually do. It was pointed out to me that there's really no writing surfaces for y'all out there. And so if you need to break out your phone, if you need to write on whatever you have, if you need to just do it in your head, go ahead and do it. But take a moment to reorient your story and how you would tell it thoughtfully and prayerfully.
Thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of our Pathfinder online community. If you are new, you can find all kinds of helpful links and resources and information in the description below, or you can go to our website, pathfinderstl.org.
Yeah. And while you're there, you can also find our message podcasts, which allow you to listen to the weekend messages on the go. We have a huge backlog of content for you to enjoy. You can also subscribe to our YouTube to stay in the loop on our current series.
Yeah, and I mean, our message podcast is also in the Apple Store, on Spotify, all those places. And finally, if you haven't done so already, we would really love it if you would join us in our mission by supporting us with a gift. You can go to pathfinderstl.org/giving. It is your generosity that allows the good news of Jesus to flow through this place to places all over the world. So we sure would appreciate your partnership with us in that. And with that, we hope you have a great week. God bless you.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next week.